Hey friends, welcome to the show today. We're really excited to be here with you. I'm Britt.
And I'm Donald.
And we take on a bunch of cringe posts that we see throughout the week, and we throw them up here, kind of talk about them and digest them. And but to start things off, we usually laugh at ourselves, and today we get to laugh at Donnie. So in December 7th, 2011, Donald Kimball writes, "Too bad I'm conservative. Otherwise, I would tell my parents that I need to quit school and my job for passionate political purposes. Occupy Skyrim."
Like, I don't know. I mean, it's just so like, oh, you think you're really clever and funny, and it's just not. It misses the mark so much. it feels like it's as tired as the "I took an arrow to the knee" meme, but like no one.
Yeah.
But no one said this, and it already feels that flat.
Yeah. You know what's funny is just seeing the date on this. It reminds me of how good the marketing was for Skyrim, because it came out on 11/11. I was like, oh yeah,
right.
I remember that. It was November 11th, and
yeah,
great game. And it's funny, you know, I think we've talked about this before, but I always would side with like the Imperials when I was in it.
Yeah.
But I think ideologically, I probably more align with the Stormcloaks, because
right.
You know, they're fighting for their homeland and everything.
Well, and I don't know. It feels like almost like they're a little tipped the scales, because they'd make the Stormcloaks like, oh, they don't believe that, you know, the other races should be there. Yeah, exactly. And you're like, well, I don't want to be a racist. I don't want to be there. So, but yeah, and then like, I don't know, like, too bad I'm conservative. Like, oh yeah, like that's the drawing mark between someone. I mean, like, it's such a cheap shot and like not funny. I don't know. It's just such a womp womp to me. That's all I hear when I see this. And I mean, like, you know, Occupy Wall Street wasn't like the kind of libertarian movement I wanted it to be, but like, you know, they did bring up good points too. And I think when you look at the crackdown of the bailing out of the large banks from government action like that, if you target the right people, the Occupy Wall Street movement actually would be correct in their anger and frustration. It was just a little misguided. But, of course, in my sort of hubris there, I'm like, oh, everyone a part of Occupy Wall Street is this stinky, lazy bum who just doesn't want to work. And it's like, oh, no, that's not it.
Yeah, the Occupy protests were interesting, because I was pretty young. I mean, this is 10 years ago now, right? So I guess I wasn't that young. I was 17, but...
Yeah.
They were interesting because you would see like, oh man, a lot of the people that really annoy me, you know, are at these things. But what they were protesting was actually pretty correct, right? Like you had these, you know, I don't know if you've ever watched The Big Short or anything like that, but like, it's like, yeah, that was going on. And these, you know, the big banks got bailed out, and they also got to take control of, you know, people's houses that got foreclosed on. Like they're genuinely evil people that should have been protested. And what's kind of it's just a bummer that a lot of that got conflated and all that. You kind of see a little bit of resurgence of it though, you know, with like the AMC and meme stocks and all that, which is kind of neat. Literally people that like, I watched this guy named Trace Trades, literally has become a millionaire on paper from AMC. And he's like, I'm not going to sell it because I just want to stick to the plan of screwing these hedge funds over. And that's kind of a cool thing. So anyways, I don't know how I deviate on that. The Occupy Skyrim, that's how it was.
Yeah. The resurgence is nice, but I also do think sometimes the aim is a little missed there. But I think this sort of occupies a reactionary side of my brain too, because it's more about, I'm just going to make a cheap shot, not actually look into what they're protesting and just be like, oh, they just want to complain because they want to complain because they're lazy. I have a job, so obviously I wouldn't be part of that, you know. And it's just
Yeah,
I don't know.
I wonder how many. I mean, you're obviously going for the likes from the Nerd Foundry. I wonder how many they got. We'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, I don't remember. I went to a small school too, so you know, wouldn't be mind blowing if it had just a handful maybe.
Yeah, small audience to appease.
Yeah.
Cool. So moving on to our quick cringe segment. We've got this wonderful shirt. For those of you that are listening, it's a shirt. It's one that I actually found in Walmart. We work really hard here at Cringe Post to find good content. But I was walking through, and it's got essential as an adjective, described as absolutely necessary, indispensable. And then underneath it says, U.S. sailors are essential to destroying your enemy. Oh, man. I forgot about this one. Oh, That's oh, well, where do you begin on it?
Well, what's funny is when I first see that, I think essential worker, like COVID.
I think that's what they made it for initially.
Right. But then the description below it, like the example is U.S. sailors are essential to destroying your enemy.
Dude.
Like, wait, did this go neocon on me?
It did. What's crazy about it, it's like, oh, like, it is more essential. It's saying the quiet part out loud, to borrow that cliche of like, in America, for, the military-industrial complex, it is more essential for us to be able to kill brown people in other countries than it is for, a self-business owner to run their business. Like, they're not essential,
Right.
but destroying other people in other countries is. I forgot about that little bit there. That's a nice surprise.
Yeah, it's funny because it gives you a little bit of whiplash. You're like, oh, I know where this is going. This is very telegraphed. And then you're like, wait, why are we talking about destroying our enemies? I mean, maybe they're talking about destroying the enemies of the anti-masker or the maskers or something. Destroying any anti-maskers there. But it really speaks to the market for the self-righteous individual who, not only is wearing a mask to declare your virtue important, but also when you had a job that the government deemed essential, you not only were, blessed with the ability to stay and work, right? But you also had to make sure everyone knew that you were essential. I'm essential. Like, okay, calm down. Some government bureaucrat thousands of miles away from you arbitrarily worked out some deal with his lobbyist that's funding his campaign so that you could stay in business. Calm down.
No, I remember, like at least in my industry that I work in, people were saying, well, the HVAC systems we work on supply all the heating and cooling for surgery rooms, and surgeries are essential, so therefore I'm essential, right? And so they'd print out their little thing saying I'm essential and all that, and it just adds to the unneeded, like the way that you kind of finagle your way around and justify it just shows how ridiculous. Like that whole premise is of like, well, the only reason you should be able to work is if you're essential. It's like if a job is providing money or if it's providing food for you or your family, it's essential, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, man, that last one, that U.S. soldiers or sailors are essential to destroying your enemy is, man, that's just like really ugly. It's not even just cringe. It's like, I don't know how to take it.
I like that this one, I think Walmart is playing both sides of the fence. They're like, we can appeal to sort of the liberal, like, holier than thou people, but then we can also get like the neocon boomers as well and sell it in the same shirt. So this is like a double roast. Bam, bam.
Yeah. What's really sad, I mean, it kind of speaks to as well, like the American ethos of like, oh, like if we don't go fight wars over there, then we're going to have to fight them over here, We do view our military and our preventative actions as essential, when in reality, they just, the whole blowback theory is true, right? Like the people that flew the planes into the two towers, it was blowback, and as stated by them. And people like to discredit that, and they like to say, oh yeah, they hate us for our freedoms, which is just the most ridiculous sentence I've ever heard. But it's like, yeah, imagine if if Mexico or Canada or not even them, like imagine if like Germany or some other country across the ocean said, hey, I'm going to set up a bunch of bases, 800 of them in your country. I'm going to determine that you can only use U.S. currency for purchasing and stuff. I'm going to determine, who gets to use oil and all this different stuff. And on top of that, I'm going to starve 500,000 of your kids and kill them. Like, I'm pretty sure we'd do a little bit more than flying planes into their buildings. We'd have some pretty crazy people doing stuff.
Think about the reaction that so many people had, both on the left and the right in our country. In 2016, the left saying that we had, Russian interference by creating like meme pages or something to elect Donald Trump. And that was, ruining election integrity. And then in 2020, Republicans saying that the election was stolen from Trump for absolute certain, and mail-in ballots are an absolute sign of our, leadership being undermined and disrupted, and it was a complete interference in American democracy. And then realize that, like, in Iran, we completely used the CIA to, overthrow their leaders actually in an actual coup, right? and understand, like, let's say that the Russian interference actually impacted the 2016 election, and let's say that the ballot it's being changed to mail-in was the determining factor in Trump's loss. Think about how much more military, well, like not military, I guess, CIA but action, incognito with actual, with an actual conspiracy involved. How much more is that gonna impact that sort of thing? So I don't know. These people, it's only wrong if it happens to us, but we can do it to them.
It reminds me of Putin in that interview where they're like, "Hey, have you killed people?" And he's like, "Yeah, you guys kill people. Like we both kill people," and like that's just how it is, right? Like it's propaganda at its finest. Like we've been conditioned to think, oh, like if U.S. does it good, if any other country does it bad, and yeah. All right, moving on to our next one. Kind of on the line of essential as well.
Yeah, this is less of a cringe post itself. It's just a hilarious photo.
So for those of you that are listening, it's a Baskin Robbins, like the ice cream place, person in their mascot costume, which is literally an ice cream with a pink nose. And it's a Snapchat, and it said they're taking a picture of themselves in the mirror in their work bathroom, saying, "How the F am I an essential worker?" it's really funny.
If you're listening to this and you're not subscribed to our YouTube or following us on Odyssey, go look, because it is such a good picture. It was so funny. And again, the post itself isn't that cringe necessarily. Just the idea that these arbitrary categories of who is and isn't essential are being drawn out. And it's like, if you had any doubt that the government can't necessarily determine what is and isn't essential, it's just like construction in Washington State, private construction was deemed non-essential.
Yeah.
But apparently this
serving
Baskin
ice
Robbins
cream,
mascot was essential. And it's like,
hey, with like Fauci's thing about double masking, I'm sure there's probably double mask worth of material in that in that mascot's costume, so must be fine, right? We should all go around wearing mascot costumes.
Yeah, I was gonna say that'll be the next policy recommendation, is that we all go out in Baskin Robbins mascot outfits, and then we'll find out that corporate Baskin Robbins is funding Fauci.
Fauci sees, oh, that's a good idea. Like, if two masks are good, why not a whole suit?
It's a bankrolling his whole rise to power there.
It is
Baskin Robbins ice cream.
I can't remember. How did they quantify whether you were essential or not? Was there like a...
It depended on the state, I think. I think each state did it individually. And I know in Washington State, for instance, it was completely arbitrary based on the governor's declarations. And they would put, I can't remember which website, it was on one of the state websites. They had a guide of to whether or not your business was essential and whether or not your employees working there were essential. So you had to check that to see whether or not you could go to work or you could keep your business open. If you could transition to working from home, a lot of places did that and were able to do that, which you were allowed to. But if you were deemed essential, you could continue as normal. And you literally had to check this website to see, am I allowed to go provide a living for my family today?
You know what's kind of horrifying? What it makes me think about is like let's say there are food shortages, right? And the government came in and started rationing it. Like, that'd be horrifying, right? And if you saw someone that like had a bunch of food or they didn't need it and they were getting their food ration, you weren't, like, you'd be infuriated, right? Who is the government to tell us who can get what and when? And with this, like, they were basically rationing people's livelihoods and time, right? It's like, hey, like, you can't have your time, you can't go work or anything like that. And just I can't imagine some restaurant owner or bar owner or someone that went out of business because they weren't able to be open or have customers in, or they couldn't have servers in or whatever, and then they go on Facebook and they say, oh, the government allowed Baskin Robbins to be on open. Yeah. Like, how just enraging that would be, and unfair and awful. So,
yeah,
still funny picture though.
Oh God, fantastic photo, absolutely worth checking out.
Moving on to our next one. So this person writes, absolutely nothing should be sold for a profit if its absence can kill you. Water shouldn't be sold for a profit. Food shouldn't be sold for a profit. Healthcare shouldn't be sold for a profit. Any system where people can die because they're unable to access these resources needs to be dismantled, aka capitalism.
What strikes me so instantly is that last line, where they say any system where people can die because they're unable to access these resources. How do you think people access water if it is not provided in a way that makes that creates an incentive and a renewable structure for water? You realize that like clean drinking water doesn't just exist, and there's not a stream running through everyone's neighborhood that you can just dip into and drink for free, right? These people realize water needs to be purified, and in order to purify most water and distribute that water, you have to have some kind of cost associated. And if you have a cost, you have to get that value from somewhere else, and it's an infinite chain, which is why you have profit, because in order to have more systems built that expands your access to water and that can make water overall cheaper and more accessible and better for more people, you have to invest in technology that's going to do that, invest in systems that do that, invest in services that are going to be able to distribute that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's... What's funny about these people is like, and I think it's like the word profit has been like misconstrued to be simultaneous with greed, right? And that's profit is not greed. Profit just means that there's more left over after you have taken, what you're supposed to or given water out, right? So if you were on a desert island and you went down to the stream and collected water, and you collected enough water for yourself to stay alive, because you expend water to go get the water, right? You're going to sweat, you're going to expend energy and all that. The water left over after, you've drunken enough to like go back and do that is the profit, right? Like it's the ability to have more to give to other people, for other people to, purchase or whatever, because there's more costs associated with that. And, these people that hate on capitalism so much, they always start talking about like renewable energy, right? Well, it's like renewable is also a thing in business. Like, it's called, you don't have a working business model if you don't generate profit. It's not sustainable. Mm-hmm. It can't continue on because you have to have, profit is blood, right? And, cash is king, but profit is blood. And if you don't make profit, you're not going to be around for very long because there's nothing to continue to fuel even your existence, not just growth. It's like greed and growth and profit kind of get used simultaneously, interchangeably, but it's just lifeblood. It's the ability to have a little bit left over after you're done and to continue into the future. I appreciate, I can't remember which episode this was, but you talked about, if you had a cow, right, and you sold milk, like that cow eventually expires, right? Like it gets old and it dies. And you not only need to make enough milk from that cow to feed yourself and your family, but you also need to sell that milk so that you have enough money in the future to buy another cow, right? If you don't have enough money to buy another cow, then there's not going to be any milk for anyone, in the village. And as Jordan Peterson puts it, under socialism, where everything is free, quote unquote, everyone has the same amount of bones to gnaw on, right? And that's what happens when you don't have profit.
Yeah. So it's insane to me that the people of this persuasion are also often the ones who are saying that they own their own labor and labor is inherently worth and have value, but then they can't see that when you use your labor like that, you are expending something. Yeah. Your labor has value, which is as a basic point we would agree on, that there is some value in labor. We would just say that value is completely subjective to what you create and what other people are willing to exchange for. But we would agree that labor generally has some kind of value. And if they're saying that their labor has X amount of value, well, then any kind of acquisition or creation or distribution of resources like this inherently costs something, meaning that unless your sole purpose is to wake up, eat just as much energy as you plan on expending that day to keep everyone at the exact same level and not, creating more food for people or not allowing more people to have food, then that's the kind of life you're locked into living, and that's not ultimately sustainable. But under a sort of a rose-colored lens aspect, that's the best you can get. If you're maintaining, if you're having no profit, then you don't ever increase any access to things that people don't have in the status quo. You can't expand access to food supplies, to water, etc.
And that's the big irony about this one too, right? Is like you look at like countries like the U.S. and obviously we don't have a completely free market, but you look at like the U.S., you look at like countries that like Poland and Hungary, which, you know, basically in the 90s got free of the Soviet Union, which are socialist, and like fantastic, basically eliminate poverty, right? Like the poorest people in these countries are like have access to all of these things, right? You can walk in any hospital and usually get health care, and it might not always be the best or whatever, but you can get it. You can get water, you can get food. And then you go and look at, you know, countries that have a mass adopted socialism, and it's like, yeah, those people can access these things. And this person is so funny because they say at the end, any system where people can die because they're unable to access these things needs to be dismantled. It's like, I agree with you. Let's dismantle those socialist societies, because in those ones, people don't have access to these things, right? They get drowned out because there's no profit motive. There's no ability for, you know, these things to be sustainable. And the big point, it's so weird to me, these people miss the point of like, we have virtually eliminated poverty in the world in the past 30 years, right? Like it used to be, you know, in the 1920s, people lived like, it was like something like 80% of the population of the world lived on less than $1 a day, like equivalent adjusted for inflation. And today, you know, it's minuscule how many people. I think it's something like 7%. And I don't quote me on that, but I'll have to find it. But it's tiny, right? Like we've basically eliminated poverty and hunger in the world, which is amazing. And that's due to innovation, which is fueled by profit, right? Like they mentioned healthcare. If you don't have profit, you don't have more money going into research to research better ways to do things to, you know, cure more people,
right,
and all that. So,
yep, absolutely. I just think of. It seems like a very simple principle that you can just look to an abstract example. Something like the black bee population in Ireland, for instance, is dying because they aren't really made well for the harsh winter climates. So someone recently has designed a new kind of hive that you can buy and create a sustainable hive for those bees, and they hope to sell them in order to save the bee population and provide, you know, access to life for those bees. That person would not have created those hives, would not put the research, would not invest the time into the design, into looking into the crazy mushroom outer materials that is used to create it. None of that would have happened if they didn't think, I can make this a profitable venture. I can make back my money that I'm putting into this and more to develop. None of that happens. And so if you can extrapolate that to bees and saving bees, you should be able to extrapolate that for the very most important things, such as water, food, healthcare.
Yeah. And what's funny, what they'll say, these kind of people will say is like, well, we should set up some sort of grant for those kind of people that are doing that. So there doesn't need to be a profit motive. It's like, well, where do you think the money for the grant is going to come from? It's going to come from the profits, right? There has to be an excess in order for it to be given to other people and to be used. That's, go for it.
I guess the other thing that I guess they might come back and say something about taxes and government. But if you think about that, well, what does government tax but your profit? Because if let's say you're let's go back to the cow. Let's say you're milking the cow and your family drinks three jugs of milk a day, and the government comes in and says, okay, we're going to take one of those jugs. Well, then your family starves and dies. So in order to pay the government their taxes, you have to make profit. So everything the government would take, every tax has to be at least taking profit that makes it so that you don't earn a profit. But the basic concept there is that profit has to exist. Whether or not it just depends on where the profit is going. So this whole analogy of nothing should be sold for a profit if its absence can kill you completely neglects the idea that even if something was being sold for flat even, there had to be profit being made somewhere in that chain so that the government could tax it to fund all of your systems anyway.
Yeah, it just completely ignores reality. It's like the equivalent of saying, you know, gravity shouldn't exist because when you fall, you die, right? Like it's just profit is just the nature of existence, and if you don't have it, you don't exist.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to our long cringe segment. This person, blue check mark, writes, "What we learned in 2020? ? That oil is worthless in a society without consumption. That healthcare has to be public because health is public. That 50% of jobs can be done from home, while the other 50% deserve more than they're being paid right now. That we live in a society, not an economy." Johnny and I had a good laugh about we live in a society, kind of like the Joker 2019 we live in a society meme. I'm pretty sure it's being said here unironically. So
I was gonna say, the moment we were looking for a post to do tonight, you know that we live in a society meme. I'm like, oh no, this can't be good. And sure enough, it's not good. This is a heap of gobbledygook that really, it seems to ignore a lot of the causes, for one thing, and misdiagnoses the cures. Oil being worthless in a society without consumption. I mean, I don't know if he's trying to make that point.
He's posting this from a phone. Like,
yeah, I know.
From a phone that sends the data to a data center, that sends it to a satellite, that sends it to Twitter's data center. Like, it's like, that all runs on gas, dude, and oil. Like, it's all energy, right? Like,
yeah. I was going to say, I mean, like, yeah, when the government interferes and manually shuts down people so they can't drive, like, yes, the patterns of usage for oil will change. That does not change the fact that oil is still necessary, unless you're saying somehow that the government shutting down all these businesses is sustainable for our economy, which it absolutely is not, because people literally can't eat and can't provide value and can't do their jobs. So I don't get what the point. Oil is worthless when you prevent people from using it, and it's like, one, no, no, because you're, like you said, you're still using energy, you're still doing it. But two, yeah, that's like a truism. Like, oil is going to be worthless when you prevent people from using it.
Yeah, if no one wants to eat, cicadas, then they're worthless as food, right? Like, yeah. It's a really weird sentence to say it that way, and coupled with being incredibly ironic that he's posting it from his phone. And that's what's so funny, about like you get these like Greta Thunberg and all these other people like made big by their online presence or whatever, or they go sail out to the Portland Harbor in their plastic canoes or whatever, or kayaks, made out of resin and all this different stuff that's made from oil, to barricade the oil ships from coming in. It's like, dude, like if you eliminated all of our consumption of oil and gasoline and all this stuff, like people would literally die. Like, and that's what they claim, right? Like they go, well, people are dying. That's the Greta Thunberg thing. It's like, yeah, dude, if you shut it off, flip the switch, like hundreds of millions of people would die. Like literally overnight, people would die. And
right.
Anyways, kind of off topic there.
Well, no, but it's not though, because in a similar way to like flipping that switch, what we learned in 2020 is that the government flipped that switch, and it did ruin lives, and it absolutely is going to have long-lasting repercussions with so many businesses that had to close. So yeah, people did die, and oil is worthless in a society without consumption. No, oil still has value. The problem is that the government arbitrarily manipulates you out of being able to use that value. So like, no, oil only lost its value insofar as it was artificially being prevented from its use. That's again not a novel concept by anyone who actually understands how economics works. So first conjecture there is kind of nonsensical.
That healthcare has to be public because health is public.
I don't know that this even argument follows. I guess if I were to try to give him the most gracious reading here, it would be that because this was a global pandemic, there needed to be mass distribution of a vaccine that would be accessible to everyone, and so public health care is the only way to make that happen. That would be my best guess.
That's the most gracious one. How I read it is because your health affects other people, the government should be able to make your decisions for health. That's how I read it, because I think that's the only thing you can take from it.
Right, and the funny thing is, in either scenario, he's still wrong.
It's horrible. Yeah,
I mean, if you even the sort of weird and not altogether free market way that the vaccine was assembled, it's like you still had people running to the corporations, and you still had the distribution coming primarily through these companies that I'm sure are getting massive bailouts by the government. It's not really that, the public healthcare is what made the vaccine rollout so public. It's more of that, like, this weird public-private partnership where the private companies had already had these years of research under their belt from mRNA, and then the government said, okay, look, we'll give you the green light to roll this out, even though our bureaucratic entities haven't gone through the normal processes. And then they're like, and we're just going to cut out the middleman here and pay for everything and then tax everyone into oblivion later. It's kind of, it's one of those things where if this tech for mRNA vaccines and stuff had been rolled through the barriers to entry from the public health officials years ago, we might not even have had to deal with COVID in the massive way we had, because mRNA vaccines for this kind of thing would have been accessible and ready and potentially passed out to people who are vulnerable and elderly to begin with. And even if not that, they probably would be accessible and cheap enough for most people to take them voluntarily without there being this absolute shutdown of a year. So like, I don't really get his point.
Yeah, it's interesting. The next one that says that 50% of jobs can be done from home, I kind of agree with, not necessarily the percentage of it, but there's a lot of office jobs that you can do from home, right? And you can be just as effective, if not more. In some studies they're saying, yeah, there is more productivity that happens from people doing stuff at home. But you do also lose like a lot of the innovation that comes from collaboration in an office space. So I don't know. I don't know if you have any perspectives on that, but I'm kind of okay with that sentence.
Well, yeah, I think I agree that it's one of those things where it's an artificial push to an inevitable future, in my opinion, in the same way that raising the minimum wage artificially pushes us to an inevitable, robo workers doing the McDonald's jobs or whatever. It's like the end result isn't necessarily a bad thing, and I agree that sometimes a little nudge is nice. It's just that for some reason that does not seem to me the biggest takeaway from the 2020 year. That's what's cringy to me, is to say like, the biggest what did we learn in 2020, and like not look at like the government has absolute totalitarian control of your life, will outright lie to you, contradict itself multiple times, and then there will be people still screaming at you in its defense. And that it has complete sovereignty over your job, your well-being, and your decision-making. None of those matter. The point is 50% of jobs can be done from home. It's like, yeah, 50% of jobs can be done from home. Cool. It kind of makes me think of some people I've talked to who during, especially during the height of COVID, when I'm all around me, I'm hearing people who are saying things like, I got laid off, I don't know how I'm gonna make rent, and like, yeah, sure, they're delaying rent, but like, when this is lifted, I don't know how I'm gonna make that. I don't have anything in my savings anymore. I have to go to food stamps for the first time in my life. I'm hearing all that, and then you hear the one person who's like, yeah, I don't know, it's been kind of nice. Like, I've been getting unemployment, and I've had a lot of free time to game, and I'm like, well, you're not wrong in the sense that, like, for you, it's been a nice change of pace because it's already something that you would like to stay at home, I guess. But, like, that's so missing the point of what's going on around you.
And what's going to happen in the future. It's like, to quote Elon Musk, if you don't make stuff, there is no stuff, right?
Yeah.
And, then it kind of tying in your minimum wage thing, the other 50% deserve more than they're being paid. And I'm assuming he's talking about, like, the quote-unquote essential workers, right? That, the Baskin Robbins mascot deserves to get paid more than the, whatever, $7.25 an hour he gets paid to dance around.
Well, and the funny thing about that to me is it's like, if you genuinely believe that the other 50% deserve more than they're being paid, well, then don't make jobs illegal. Because then, guess what? You have you make it impossible for businesses to provide that kind of wage for them. If you shut down wealth creation tools, then you're not going to have the wealth to give people who deserve more. Do I think someone working in a pandemic, let's say that they had to fire 3 of their employees because they're only able to do carry out, right, instead of having indoor dining. So they only have like 2 people, they're short staffed, they have to wear the mask, and it's, kind of hellish. Do I believe he deserves to be paid more than he is? Yeah, actually probably yeah. But the problem is that the government has specifically created the conditions in which that is impossible. And so it's one of those things where these people will be better off when, the business itself can make those determinations. Because if a business wants to stay open and an employee is not willing to work in that kind of condition because of their public health, well, guess what? The business will have to pay them more for them to stay there if they want to keep working. or if they want to stay in business. So it's almost like this reverse incentive thing where if a business really wants to stay open and really wants to have workers operating there, they will give them that increase in pay when they voluntarily choose to stay, instead of, crippling the business from doing anything that creates value.
Yeah, it's worst of both worlds for the business and the worker. Yeah,
exactly.
And then finally, the legendary last line, that we live in a society, not an economy.
Which is funny because it's like, no, what? But do you even know what economics is? It's the study of human action. Like, of course you live in an economy.
The economy is us.
the society is the economy. It's like, we don't live in an economy? Like, really, bro? Do you live in, like, a vegetable world where you look around and nobody's doing anything? There's no human choices being made?
I wonder what he means by society. Like, let's just say he's taking the actual definition of it.
If I had to guess before you look it up, my guess would be sort of the feels around social, the sort of socialist mantra of like, we live in like a community that should be taking care of each other, or something like that. We live in a world where with real humans, not cold, unfeeling dollars. Like, that's to me is the feeling this Joker gives off.
Yeah, this Joker, good pun. The dictionary definition is the aggregate of people living together in a more or less ordered community. So that sounds about right.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know how you, I was going to say, I don't know how you have an ordered community without an economy. It's like, I don't know whether that's, even if you're saying a planned economy, you would, even if you think that that's the way to go, you still have the economy, right? Like, that's the funny thing.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. Like, how can you make the economy, kind of like with that last person that was talking about profit, it's like, how can you make the economy the bad guy in this? Like, it's just existence. It's like a law, right? Like, right. It's a structure that exists regardless of whether you deny it or not. Like, the last sentence is no less silly than yelling at the sun like, I hate how hot you are. It's just, people are going to trade and things have to grow in order for them to survive. You don't really get to stand still. And that's how life goes. And it's really interesting. Like, and these people claim, like anarcho-capitalists like you and I, like, live in a utopia, right? And it's like, I don't know, man, which is more of a utopia? One that doesn't have an economy, like a fundamental, infrastructure that, makes it possible for people to live and grow and survive, or a society where everything just magically happens for free. I saw this other post where it was, and maybe we'll do it later, but basically this person's like, well, we could live in a society where we just, look up at the stars and eat fruit, but we chose to have credit scores and business. And it's like, okay. That sounds like a utopia that is never going to happen to me. Like,
I was going to say, you're eating fruit, looking up at the stars, and meanwhile, like, your next door neighbor's dying of poverty, like, in
I mean, they have that. You can go try that out, one of these in Haiti, dude, you can go try it. Like,
you're the only neighborhood that, you picked the first apple on the only tree that had fruit on it, and you couldn't plant a seed because that'd be an economy. So you're enjoying your fruit, looking up at the stars. Well, meanwhile, your neighbors are just like groveling and trying to find some worms in the dirt to eat. But careful, don't dig too much, or else you're creating a business there to find worms.
Don't share that fruit either.
Oh, heck no. It's when you bring up the utopia point too, people, I think, just we're so far removed from the very roots of society and the agrarian nature from which we have grown, that they don't understand, like, the premise that nature has, like, the fundamental principle of erosion. Like, nature is cyclical, but it also is destructive. And so you as a human being are a destructive force of nature if you are not creating, because you are a parasite. Wow. If you are eating the fruits off the trees and you're not planting the seeds from those fruits, all you're doing is being a parasite. All you do is take the produce, and then if you don't, maintain, you aren't part of that nature's cyclical regrowth and birth. And that's the beautiful thing about the history of humanity, is while it is rife with destruction, as is all of nature, the overwhelming story of humanity has been the triumph of creation and growth. And none has none of human history has done that more successfully than when we have had periods of free trade and exchange.
Yeah. And this kind of brings me to like a thought I've had for a long time. A lot of these free market types, or even conservatives, you commonly find them among the blue collar workers, right? Like if you look at any building in like downtown Seattle or any sort of city, it's like every single one of those is a miracle, right? Because of just all the amount of work that is into it, and it's built on top of each other. It's literally generations of people building on top of what the previous generation built on. And it's like, this kind of person, if I told them like, hey, I want you to go hang, 12 feet of drywall, like if I guarantee you after they did that, they would look at all these buildings with a whole new appreciation of the amount of effort it takes, right, to have these things. They don't just exist, right? And then not only after you build them, you build them and it takes a lot of work, but after you build them, they have to be maintained, right? Like it's a constant struggle of human effort and work and input for these things to not become overgrown with nature, right? Where like you were saying, nature destroys. And I think that's why blue collar workers have such a conservative and free market view, is because they realize what it takes to hold back nature, right? Yeah. And that's and these kind of people, and that's why you see a lot of these more, maybe tech people, these people that think that 50% of us can work from home, generally lean left and think that we can have this utopia, because everything in their life that keeps back nature is removed from them. They don't have to deal with that. They deal with other stuff that's equally as important, right? But it's digital, or it's something you can literally do from your computer. It's not beating back bushes or hanging drywall or crafting metal. It's stuff you do with your brain, which is good. You need both of those kind of people in the world. But when one of them starts denying the reality that the other does, you end up with Venezuela, right? Or you end up with Ukraine after the Bolsheviks, kill all the farmers, and then everyone in the city starves to death because there's no food. Like they don't realize it's like, oh, it takes a lot of work to harvest, any sort of food or any sort of crop for people to get fed. And
yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, I think a lot of people in the tech sector, like you mentioned, they almost believe that you can create from nothing, that you start from scratch and create from this sort of tabula rasa. And it's like, no, even when let's say a computer was just given to you and you're living in, or you're using like a library's internet or electricity. It's like, you still have to realize that the electricity that powers the screen, the factories that produced the plastic on your and metal on your laptop, all of those things are consuming energy. And so it's not just like you have this blank slate you're starting from and then building some digital code from there. Like your energy consumption, you using the battery on your laptop or your power supply unit into the wall, that is consuming something as you use it. So while you're creating, you are also consuming. And so it's this constant building. When you're building, you are also destroying, and you have to build up. You can't just stay in that under the trees or under the stars eating fruit, because you're not starting from a blank slate.
Eventually, no fruit's left.
Yeah, right, exactly. And in the same way, when you're creating code or something, it's not like you're just creating this code from nothing. In a sense you are, right? Like there's the code language building is like putting it together of building blocks into this beautiful thing that you've made. But even the process of typing that out uses something and is standing on the previously built structures that have gotten you to that spot.
Yeah, like you think about like this phone, right? Like if I went to someone, and because you could code an app on a phone, right? But if I went to someone, I said, hey, like I'm going to drop you off in the middle of the jungle, and you've got to make this phone. It would literally be impossible, right? Because everything that goes into it, like you think about like the plastic shell. It's like, okay, great. Like I got to get a plastic shell. Well, to get plastic shell, you've got to have some sort of factory that can, create that plastic. Well, to build that factory, you got to have bulldozers, right? You got to clear the land. It's like the amount of effort. I think, is it Milton Friedman that has the pencil analogy? Like how many people does a pencil employ? And he starts going through, he's like, well, it employs all the rubber workers that mine the rubber, down in South America, as well as all of the different workers that created the tools to make the mine, for that rubber. And then all the people that mined all the lead and the wood that was chopped down and all the tools that make that. It's like, wow, like a pencil employs, tens of thousands of people, right? And then the beauty of it is you get to spend 5 cents or whatever to buy it. And these coders, right, because in their mind, are creating something out of nothing, right? They go sit in front of a screen and they type some things, and based on how they arrange it, it turns out something amazing, which is awesome. But like you're saying, it's built on the foundations of literally hundreds of years of work and innovation and chopping things down and building things back up and slamming metal together and blood, sweat, and tears. And I guess the further removed you are from that, the harder it is to understand reality itself, because that is reality, right? The world is trying to overcome us with via nature.
And that's why this is an economy and not as just a society, right? Because there's all these components that all tie in, and another reason why every worker really that's providing value is essential, because there's all these components that build together that create something that someone else needs somewhere in the world. So to sort of combine all these things, like every worker is essential, and we live in an economy because societies need economies to function, and so no, you can't just pick and choose what you think is good, in terms of what you want to function in the economy, what's essential, what is valuable in the sense of just a society that looks back on the stars, and you have to contend with the reality that human choice, if it is not free to build and create, will destroy, and then you don't have access to things like water and healthcare. If you're not creating, you are destroying.
Yep, that's good. I feel we've done this one pretty good. Do you anything else on it?
No, I just will be waiting for my Baskin Robbins mascot outfit in the mail. I do hope that comes soon. I want to be protected from Corona.
Yes. And maybe you'll get some free ice cream with it too.
Well, free. Well,
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, friends, thanks for tuning in and listening to us. If we said anything that makes you cringe, or if you have any thoughts that you want to share with us, please hit us up on our socials. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, all of those things at Cringe Post Pod. You can also visit us at our website at cringepost.com. We'd love to hear from you, whether we said something that made you cringe or if you have thoughts, like I said. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm Britt, Donnie here, and we're thankful to be able to go through these each and every single week with you guys. Catch you later.